So we are very thankful to you, sir, for accepting our invitation and chairing for this session, sir. And Professor Venkatesh, sir is from Department of Public Administration, Ambedkar Open University. Sir has extensively contributed to the development of not only the discipline of public administration, but also in the institution building of the university for the past few decades. And Professor Srinivas Reddy, sir, is from Kakatiya University, former professor, and sir has held several positions, not only in the academic distinction sir has, but also sir has a lot of contribution in the administration. As yesterday, our Honorable Vice Chancellor sir was telling that we from public administration, we are not only contributing to the discipline, but we are contributing to the practice of public administration also in the various capacities. Professor Kedivon Fago sir is from South Africa and currently Director of School of Government Studies in the Northwest University. Sir is currently serving as Editor-in-Chief for the Journal of Public Administration and is also the member of South African Association of Public Administration. So we welcome you, sir. And Sunil Dutt, sir, sir has got a very high rich academic research sir has got a lot of experience in the administrative and the governance reforms and public policy aspects. And sir was also earlier Indian Institute of Public Administration. Sir has served as the editor for that, for the quarterly journal of the institute. We welcome you, sir. Professor E. Venkatesu, sir, again from Central University of Hyderabad. Sir is, very popular among the young scientists, social scientists, nationwide and international wise. Sir has been participating in several deliberations and sir has a lot of contribution as a member in the International Public Policy Association. And sir was a member in the delegation led by the Union Minister for the Panchayat Raj and Rural Development to Norway. And sir interests are public policy, governance, and election studies and all. And we can see sir very frequently on the TV in the several election analyses and other things. Professor Baldeep Singh, sir, is currently head Department of Political Science, University of Jammu, and sir has held several positions in the Jammu University, like Director, Head Department, Convener Board of Studies, Director UGC Nehru Center, Studies Center, and other various capacities sir has performed. Sir has very rich administrative experience. So with these few words of introduction, now I request Yashwant Udin madam. So as a mark of a token of respect, we would like to present a plant sampling to the distinguished guests on the dais. Kevin,
Namaste, sir.
Now I request our Honorable Chair, Professor G. Haragopal sir, to kindly chair the session and conduct the further proceedings, sir. Thank you.
Professor Sitaram Rao, Vice Chancellor of this university, and of course, distinguished scholars and friends. I just will take about 5-10 minutes, just making opening remarks. And chairing a session is a policing job, basically, because you have to maintain the time and respect the scholars. And I have lost a couple of friends because I chaired a session and one of my friends who works in Chandigarh, I had to stop him. And he became so angry that he stopped talking to me. So these experiences are always there. But still, I hope that all the speakers themselves will observe the time because we have about 1.5 hours. And I also came a little late. Basically, I would like to say that since this session is an interdisciplinary session, if you look at discipline of public administration, and yesterday also some ground must have been covered. If you look at all these scholars who we teach as a part of formation theory, see, if you start with structural theory, classical, Luther, Gallic, and Ludwig, they were the managerial background. And if you look at Max Weber, whose contribution we consider, is basically a sociologist, is a structural functionalist. And his entire model is a structural functional model. If you look at Herbert Simon, he was an economist. He got a Nobel Prize in economics. If you look at Chester Bernard, he was the chairman of a Bell telephone company. And based on his experience, he has written Functions of the Executive. Riggs himself was a sociologist. So all these scholars who have contributed to the discipline of public administration, none of them was basically trained in the public administration discipline. And Professor Ramreddy used to say that public administration is a discipline in search of subject matter. And sociology is a subject matter in search of a discipline. Sociology has a huge knowledge system. But what is the central focus of sociology? Although one may say consciousness, culture, but I think sociology still does not know what is the central focus. Whereas political science focuses on power, economics focuses on production. But when you come to sociology, it's a huge discipline. Once in the University of Hyderabad, when I wanted to introduce cinema society and organizational structure or larger society, my department didn't accept. They said, no, cinema won't fit into political science. I said, cinema actors are becoming chief ministers, so we have to somewhere look why a cinema hero becomes a political hero. But my colleague said, no, don't bring cinema and all that. So at one stage, I told my department, I'll go to sociology department and teach this subject. Because actually sociology, everything fits in. But as far as public administration, of course, our focus has been always on authority. But if you look at Indian public administration, these 75 years, all scholars were political scientists. The first generation of scholars, they were all political scientists. Perhaps our generation was the first to be trained in public administration. But later, see, as I was teaching, I realized that our discipline has become very, very, a little narrow in the sense that public administration got separated from political science. Of course, political science got separated from history. And if you look at public administration, at least Usman University, there was no reference to state, Indian state or nature of state. And public administration is applied politics. It's an applied, it's a very concrete subject. Unlike many other subjects, we deal with the everyday life of the people, how bureaucracy negotiates, how administration negotiates. But if you do not talk of the nature of the state, then you will not be able to understand public administration. So as I joined Department of Political Science, I realized how come that we don't teach the Indian state, nature of the state, origin of the state, and how administration developed over a period of time. I think that has been perhaps major limitation of the discipline of public administration. And as the Indian, if you look at Indian public administration, if you look at the nature of the state, or even in all India level, the new public management or new public administration is a product of neoliberal economic model. As the neoliberalism came, then they started talking in terms of a different, a totally different focus. And I think Open University had a book, I mean, a study material I was editing, and that was all on new public administration. So all that we taught, all that we have believed, completely new public administration changes its focus. And most of our theory would not even apply to that. It's all managerial, it's all, technological. So it's a techno-managerial approach. When you come to the latest developments in the discipline of public administration. So I think we have had this problem. But the way discipline has grown and the way discipline has been declining. And one of the reasons why the discipline started declining, because the discipline has grown when the Indian state or the nature of the state had a welfare program, state had an intervention, and state had a lot to do with the changing the nature of, particularly India, Constitution of India itself mandates Indian state to transform the society. No other constitution in India, in the world, talks of change of the society. It is always managing a society, maintaining an order. But Indian constitution is totally different. That's why in India, when public administration discipline started, public administration had a lot of role. Public enterprise, Professor Ram Reddy used to teach public administration as a part of one of our, subject. And Professor Ram Reddy, he's the doctorate. His basic, this one was that when he studied London School, otherwise he was a political scientist. But then public enterprise, he specialized in public enterprises in London School of Economics. And that's how he came to public administration. And he was teaching at the public enterprise. But what do you teach now about public enterprises? You have to talk of the privatization. You have to talk of, and we were taught public enterprises should be never judged on the basis of profit. It's a part of the service to the society. The state performing infrastructure development and all that. But then what has happened is that this role of the state is declining. What happens to public administration discipline? Now, what is that you are going to now teach about public administration? I think this is going to be a major problem. But I always feel that since profession is in a crisis, public administration also is both a discipline and a profession. If the profession is in crisis, it's an opportunity for the discipline. Because studying a society in crisis reveals the nature of society better than in order. I think public administration discipline that way today has to, it has an important role in terms of disciplinary focus. Why our profession or the public administration is in a crisis? Why public administration, the way it functions in India, what happened to public? If you look at the IAS officers, first 2-3 generations, we had excellent IAS officers, excellent. Shankaran, Yugandhar, Kerala, at least in the combined state of Andhra Pradesh, we had 100, we have at least a dozen IAS officers who are very ideal, very committed. Shankaran was, of course, a legendary figure, and one of my scholars has done PhD on Shankaran, moral, legal, rational authority of Max Weber. So, that way, but today, if you look at IAS officers, I used to go to, Missouri for the National Academy. And of course, recently I met a young IAS officer, had to go to Bapatla to give a lecture. None of them is interested. Nobody was listening to a lecture. They are all engineers. 60 to 70% of IAS officers today are from IITs and engineering background. And neither they know discipline, they know social sciences, they don't understand anything. So if today you interact with young bureaucrats, several of our students are also there, completely, of a different nature. compare them with the other generations, because when state had a positive role, these public administrators were committed. But as the role of the state is declining, public administration got into crisis. I think this part of the thing, I think discipline, some of the very distinguished scholars are here. I think now our focus perhaps will have to shift. And basically, I would say that public administration is itself is an interdisciplinary, in its nature and in its focus. I think that's how perhaps we have to, focus. And I'm sure that all these scholars in this panel are very distinguished scholars. I'm sure that they will focus. I'm thankful to Pallavi because and Venkataya, of course, uh, my friend Professor Sitaram Rao, for asking me to chair this session. I consider this an opportunity to listen to these scholars. So now I welcome Venkataya. You can, Srinivas Reddy is the first.
Yes, sir. Srinivas Reddy is joining online.
Srinivas Reddy is a very good scholar. He's a very bright and promising mind. And his articulation also is extremely good, both in Telugu and, but now he has become a poet. So a public administration scholar becoming a poet, this is also very interesting. That how he writes very good poetry. And he continuously writing, doesn't write much on public administration, even the management now, which is teaching. But he writes a poetry, very emotional and extremely, I mean, some of the poems are extremely good. So I think he's an interdisciplinary man, that literature and also public administration. So now I request Professor Srinivas Reddy to make his, please confine yourself to the time, maybe about 10 to 15 minutes. And I welcome him to make his presentation. Srinivas Reddy. Working is a problem. Online presentation is always a problem. But in the Institute for Social and Economic Change, they have it's like 4 sites. So using any place you can watch it.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Hello. Good morning. Hello. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Hello, sir. It is audible, sir. You can proceed.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. My esteemed teacher, one second. Professor Argopal Garu, and distinguished panelists, Professor Singh, Professor Venkataya, Professor Sunil Dutt, Professor Venkatesh, and participants in the plenary 2. I'm asked to speak on the interdisciplinary nature of public administration. And before I do that, I should like to compliment the Department of Public Administration of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University and Professor Pallavi in particular for organizing this major academic event in circumstances wherein public administration has declined from the status of being a very eloquent and audacious discipline in India to one of helplessness. The theme chosen for this international conference, namely 75 years of public administration discipline in India, is highly relevant, and perhaps it provides a context to dilate on how to resurrect the discipline to a status of being a healthy discipline. I take this opportunity to felicitate Professor K. Sitaram Rao, currently Vice Chancellor of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, and my long-term friend, who is, coming to an end of his second tenure as Vice Chancellor. I heartily felicitate him. I also felicitate Professor AVN, the Registrar and the Professor of Public Administration, Ambedkar University, who is also superannuating shortly. With their exit, I think Ambedkar Open University has been a good venue to discuss and dilate on several interesting themes on relevant for public administration in the last 1 decade. Perhaps this is one anchor that the discipline of public administration is losing. And I take this opportunity to wish both of them very happy post-superannuated life. Of course, Professor Sitaram Rao has superannuated from Kakti University, but as Vice Chancellor, he will be coming to an end. I wish that he will be successful in getting the third term. I'm joining this conference from US, New Jersey, where I'm in the midst of a birthday party of my granddaughter, for which purpose I traveled from India here. And interestingly, there is a coincidence. Today is my granddaughter's birthday. It's going on. I have come up to join this. And I thank the organizers for giving me this privilege of joining online. My qualifications for doing this perhaps is I've been a student of public administration from 1966 as a student of BA Public Administration. And my interest has been live. So Professor Argopal sir was saying that, I'm getting into kind of poetry, but this is more to, just to give some vent to some little creative craving, but my interest in public administration is intact. Though I'm currently a professor of management at Aurora's Business School. I have that also as an important responsibility. Now, coming to the theme of the interdisciplinarity of public administration is an out and out interdisciplinary discipline, as any other social science would be. Public administration is an applied social science, and as a subject or discipline, its application of various inputs relevant for government from various disciplines. The chairman was in his opening remarks mentioning that the discipline and the fundamental theories or the subject matter of this has been developed by scholars from different disciplines like economics, political science, sociology, engineering, etc. In a way, public administration is a study of government in action, combining insights from many different disciplines, largely social science, but also others, among whom political science, law, management, economics, sociology, and particularly social psychology part of social, so the interface between social and psychology are important areas. Its interdisciplinarity can also be understood from the point of view that its subject matter was originally part of different other subjects, such as law, politics, economics, etc. But it has developed into a separate discipline in the last 1.5 centuries. if you have to reckon, this Wilsonian dichotomy as the beginning of public administration. Of course, this is hotly contested by other scholars. Coming to India, it is still struggling. Public administration is still struggling to establish its identity. Even at this point also, if you have a all India perspective, public administration is largely considered a sub-discipline of political science rather than an independent discipline of public administration. And public administration as a profession has always been interdisciplinary. Even if you look at the way public administration teaching was done, or the way the kings were prepared, or the important state officials were prepared, the training that was given to them, the crown prince or maybe the person who is succeed to power. So the inputs were interdisciplinary. And unfortunately in India, although there has been talk about public administration being interdisciplinary, and also the need for interdisciplinarity in public administration has been all the time emphasized. But the way the discipline has been functioning, there has been, in fact, as the chairman was mentioning, initially the first generation, the foundational thinkers of public administration, as well as the first generation, stalwarts of public administration have been people with interdisciplinary background. But this has declined steeply. Today, public administration is being run, particularly in the formal sense, in the departments and colleges. The teachers of public administration particularly are people with very narrow disciplinary background, narrow training. Now, just reflecting on the status of discipline of public administration, the behavioralism and the emergence of behavioral sciences has given a big push to the interdisciplinary nature of public administration by stressing the unit of method between social sciences and natural sciences. So therefore, public administration has been enriched because of the behavioralist movement, and to the point that it has been taken closer to natural sciences. And it was thought that the methods of study of natural sciences are also applicable to social sciences. The comparative public administration movement, or the contributions to comparative public administration, development administration, ecology of public administration, all have given much impetus to the interdisciplinary nature of the subject of public administration. In a way, even the new public administration, emphasizing on values, relevance, change, and all that, has underscored the importance of interdisciplinary study of public administration. And truly, the administrative phenomena is very, very complex. And it's not sufficient if somebody tries to understand public administration from the perspective of the scholars of public administration alone. There is need to understand the administrative phenomena from a wider perspective, from an interdisciplinary perspective. But unfortunately, the departments of public administration, as they are staffed by purely scholars of public administration, is not proving equal to the need of understanding the administrative phenomena. Sometimes people feel that, because of new public management and also the developments such as privatization, globalization, and all that, the scope of public administration is declining. But contrary to this, the scope of public administration has been there as much as it was there before in the tri-planetary world and the post-COVID world. Public domain or the government's importance is not necessarily declining, but it is also increasing. From this, perspective, I would like to make a few observations, some suggestions to strengthen the interdisciplinary nature of public administration. The first thing is that although I've been hearing about the interdisciplinary nature of public administration for the last 60 years at least, since I've joined the public administration academia as a student. But the real interdisciplinariness in the study of public administration has not progressed every bit. This is very a thing that should be matter of concern for all the scholars of public administration. Of course, when you look at the training of civil servants, the training of civil servants is being done in a largely interdisciplinary manner. If you go to the Indian Institute of Public Administration or Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy, Indian Police Academy, Administrative Staff College, NIRD. So these are all institutions which are largely giving training to public servants, and they are largely interdisciplinary. The lack of disciplinarity is more in the academia of public administration. To offset this, perhaps the faculty of public administration in the university should be broad-based. As it is, if you go to any university in the country, you have only people who are qualified in public administration or teaching. There are people who only think that employment is the real criteria or concern. But to teach public administration effectively, the department should be staffed by scholars from different disciplines like social psychology, maybe management, economics, etc. But that's not happening. So therefore, I think there is need to do something about this. I would suggest one important suggestion I should like to make is that public administration should be taught in a truly interdisciplinary way by having the teaching should be done by not only teachers of public administration, but by various allied discipline teachers. Even the master's program in public administration currently, several universities have public administration as a qualification at the undergraduate level to get seat at the postgraduate level. This should be done away with. Some universities have already done, other universities also should do. Secondly, the public administration curriculum. In fact, the teachers of public administration, the way they are trained in a very, very narrow way. Of course, there is no formal training at all. The training stops with their education or maybe a little more when they do their research, but beyond that, it is not. So therefore, the subject of public administration at master's level should be widened. I think have a fancy idea, you may say fancy idea. So 2-year program, there should be teaching of broad social science in first year, and there should be teaching of public administration in second year. This is one way of doing. Or maybe other way of doing is that, first year you have one semester on various theories of public administration, one semester on fundamental social science, and the last should be left for specializations. Students should be, the public administration scholars are not finding employment for the reason that it is seen more as a liberal science or liberal subject than as something which is preparing somebody for employment. And I would also suggest that in the NET exam, we have two components on which a student is tested. One, research methodology. The other one is about the subject proper. But to become a good academic in public administration or in any other social science discipline, one should have a broad understanding of social sciences. I would suggest that in the NET examination, there should be 3 components instead of 2 components to test the capability of a scholar to become a research scholar or to become a teacher of various social science subjects. There should be test on research methodology. There should be test on the subject proper, and also there should be test on the broad social sciences. The teaching departments also should be restructured with some component of other social science faculty also having what's in the Department of Public Administration. Or there should be, I think now in the credit system, these things are being encouraged. So this is something also needed. Lastly, I would also suggest that, the government has been funding Indian Institutes of Management, Indian Institutes of Technology. They are producing first-class management graduates, postgraduates, and technology graduates. But they're all serving the private sector largely. Hardly anybody is there serving the government sector. Perhaps if they become IAS officers or all India civil servants, they are doing it, but that's a very small number. But the government has not thought it fit to establish something like Indian Institutes of Public, and I'm not talking about a Delhi one, IIPA Delhi, which is only training civil servants but no, institutions like IIMs should be established in every state to give good training in public administration. So with these suggestions, I conclude my presentation. I thank the organizers for this opportunity. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I think in his presentation, 2 things come out clearly. One is that we have to have a social science perspective before you start teaching the discipline. That means he would like the discipline of public government to be located in the larger social science context. And he also said natural science. In fact, Riggs, when he developed his model, he borrowed from physics, from the light theory. So basically, my understanding is knowledge is to only 2 domains. One knowledge is the relation of human being with nature. Another knowledge is relation between human beings. All knowledge is that. So natural scientists study about relation with the nature. We study relations between human beings. Then the rest of the knowledge has to be located in that larger context. Thank you, Srinivas, for making this presentation. Now I request Professor Kalibon Pago, Director, School of Government Studies. Chair. A paradigm and a phenomenology of public administration in a global context, I think is very interesting. A focus on global south. Now, that explains how public administration, those who speak, are trying to locate it in the larger global context. And again, the context of global south. I'm happy, sir, and I request you to please the presentation.
Presenting online.
Oh, easy one.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Professor Pago, please take about 10 to 12 minutes. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, audible, sir.
Yeah, you are audible. You are audible.
You can proceed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to thank the organizers, the university, and the Department of Public Administration that has really taken this giant step to organize this important conversation. And I'm also thankful and privileged to come and do a talk. So I also want to stand on the previously established protocol and thank my panelist as well, and Professor Reddy, who was first on the panel in talking about the interdisciplinary nature of public administration. Thank you, Chair, for the kind introduction. My topic, as you have alluded, is a paradigm and phenomenology of public administration in a global context and a focus on a global South. So I just want to have a quick refresher on some of the paradigms that, of course, are highly contested, even in the way we talk about them in our discipline. The fact that we trace the discipline to the politics and administration dichotomy of 1900s to 1926, and the principles of administration from 1926 to 1937, and public administration as political science. The chair was also talking about that in his opening remarks, from 1950 to 1970, and of course, public administration as public management from 1956 to 1970, and the public administration as public administration from 1970 to date, that we still grappling with the phenomena. And of course, public administration as we consider it from government to governance, which peaked in the 1990 to date, and the major discourse at the moment that we are seeing as the future digital e-governance from 2000 to date. And I'm also quoting Saxena, who published this material in 2020. So although we not often spoken about, what I also want to advance, Chair, is the manner in which this is embedded in the way we talk in our discipline. So my submission to this discussion is that there are philosophical issues that come to play when we talk about this, especially when we talk about these different the different paradigms that I have just alluded to. The embeddedness here raised the question of methodology. So we want to talk on how do we pursue the understanding of our discipline as it has been evolving. But we also talk about the teleology. So we want to understand the purpose of the discipline. We want to talk about ontology, the nature of the phenomenon at play and the discipline itself, as well as the axiology, which speaks to the ethical nature of the way we conduct research in our discipline. And for me, these are very important elements, ladies and gentlemen, because they were not really properly questioned in so many ways. They were accepted as they were presented by scholars around the world. And I think it is in this that defining the future of public administration, that we need to ensure that a phenomenon of countries from the global South need to be featured very strongly. So this feature needs to mainstream the global discourse of the discipline in the true sense of the word global. This means that even our theories must ensure that at the very least we center our epistemological and our ontological perspectives in our attempt to make this conversation, including the way we want to decolonize our public administration education for our own students and our own society. We know that theory provides significant guidelines and trails for the conduct of research by pointing to areas that are most likely to be fruitful that is, areas in which meaningful relationships among variables are likely to be found. If the variable come to be selected such that no relationships between them are obtained or seen, the research will obviously be sterile, no matter how meticulous the subject, the subsequent observation and inferences are made. So a theoretic system narrows down the range of facts that we, of course, need to study. And we know that theory provides the researcher with a definite viewpoint and a direction which goes a long way towards helping the researcher inquire into relationships between the various aspects of the research, including the variables that are selected from amongst this array of variables. So Oppenheimer reminds us that in order for us to understand anything, we have to fail to perceive a great deal that is there. Knowledge itself is purchased at the expense of what might have been seen and learned, and what is not. It is a condition of knowledge that somehow we rather pick the clues which give us insights into what we have to find out about the world. I close quote from Oppenheimer. So for me, ladies and gentlemen, the question of our epistemology, of our ontology, of our teleology, of our axiology raises the question that we need to consider our own reality. We need to consider our own phenomenon within the global South. And we need to do that if justice to the evolution and the future of public administration is to be made in recognizing our own contribution to the discipline. Professor Reddy was just saying he has been a student since the 1966. So this is quite important that our own contribution in this fashion is mainstreamed. In other words, we need to clearly measure up to the game, even with these existing standards, and show that we from the global South do matter. So we should provide alternatives that would mainstream and embed our knowledge from the global South perspective. It is on this basis that the notion of what I consider as a triage phenomenology, leadership, and what I also consider as the rehumanizing of public service need to be central to our academic discourses in shaping the future of our discipline. So these three elements, Chairperson, I'm going to quickly focus on them in concluding my talk. Triage phenomenology, it's quite important. The word triage obviously is a popular medical concept, and this is used in the prioritization of patients within a particular situation or even a healthcare facility. So because public administration largely in its practice deals with the provision of public service, this is often considered in the way government would process their budget votes in our public legislatures. So we need to embed and really mainstream this question of triage if we are going to understand the phenomenology and the phenomena of public administration within our own environment and experiences. So we need to do that quite a lot. So Chamberlain asserts that there are certain aspects that we need to consider if we want to define the word phenomenon or phenomenology in this particular context where we are able to prioritize. And he calls the first one intuiting, that deals with a situation where someone's lives with the phenomenon itself. And the second one is analyzing, that serves to consider a focus on the structure of the phenomenon, and the third is describing, which considers the discoveries of the research at present. So the second point of us understanding the phenomenology, us understanding the manner in which we want to contribute to the discipline of public administration as it evolves, that we are grappling with in most of our countries in the global south, are the questions of leadership. So we know that leadership remains a contested question in many of our situations. So to mainstream the question of how do we better and improve and even maybe understand the manner in which the leadership phenomenon plays itself out, we need to understand the way public leadership seeks to serve the interest of public good. So in other words, we need to do checks and balances of how can we make sure that our leaders rise above the rhetoric but move to substantive politics that will eventually serve the purpose as for the reason we have public administration and public institutions. But there we also need to remember that there should be a higher purpose. There need to be the question of trust, sustainability, but we need to maintain the question of diversity that often plays itself out within our literature, within our societies, within our spaces. But finally, in terms of leadership, we need to remember that we need leaders that will take actions. Because if leaders do not take actions, but they spend a lot of time talking, that actually delays far much more than what we should be doing in our communities in order to render public administration relevant. The last one, Chair, speaks about the question of what we call rehumanizing the public sector. We know that the history of many of our global south are littered with external attacks, defeats, slavery, colonization, stolen identities. And I don't think we have really done justice to mainstream this, even within our own various countries in the global south. So this views assumes that we have been dehumanized for centuries. And so the value of us being humans, to a very large extent, need to be recovered. And this is partly or even why we have poverty and underdevelopment. That is within the public administration literature and the literature in the overall social sciences discipline, looking at us synonymous with poverty and underdevelopment. So we need to re-look into this. We need to look into public institutions that can be used to maintain the development of vulnerable groups amongst ourselves, women, people living with disabilities that have been super exploited. And we, as scholars during this age, continue to perpetuate those kind of systems that exploit these vulnerable groups. We need to confront our current realities, our challenges of poverty, of poor education, our health, our roads, so the overall infrastructure. And we need to remind the middle class, because often the middle class is, which is us, many of us, we continue to perpetuate the status quo by creating parallel systems, parallel governance systems, instead of contributing to the existing and changing the course. We create parallel systems. So we create parallel private schooling system, parallel private medical health systems, and that does not help the ailing public sector, because we do not worry about that. But I think, Chair, to rehumanize our public sector even more, we need to remember that we need to go back to the values of constitutionalism. So if we uh, do not embed constitutional elements and values in our in the way we teach public administration, in the way we practice public administration, that would not constitute the best way of rehumanizing the public sector. And of course, the current century requires us to modernize public administration. So our conversations on how best can we deploy and use the artificial intelligence, the fourth industrial revolution, not only by the middle class, not only by the researchers within the university spaces, but our communities, so that they are able to maintain relevance and benefit in the overall education system. And lastly, Chair, we need to refocus on the quality of public service. So each of our countries, each of our universities, we can find a way of defining what it means by quality public service. Thank you, Chair. I hope this helped the discourse.
Thank you, Professor BRAOU. It's a very interesting presentation. I think what Professor Srinivas Reddy started, I think Professor BRAOU also is suggesting that we have to widen the discipline and the concerns. And he would like also to focus on the quality of public services. And when he said that the focus of public administration shifted from the government to governance, I'm reminded that about 3 decades back, ICSR used to have a survey every decade about the status of the discipline. So there was also a panel studying public administration as a discipline and the status of the discipline. Professor Paipanandikar was our chairman and I was a member of the committee. So when he said the focus will be on governance, I have not agreed. There was a serious debate. I said, how can you shift from a structure to process? How can any discipline survive just studying the process unless you study the underlying process and larger structure? So finally, I said, unless you have a discussion on the state, you can't have the. Then he said, okay, we'll try to change. You write on the state. What is the research done on Indian state? So I reviewed about 50, 60 works on the Indian state I have written. But this shift started from the structure to process. Now everybody is talking that we have to widen, we have to have a social science perspective, and if we want to make substantial contribution, Professor BRAOU was arguing that if you can contribute, if your concerns are widened and study the poverty, in fact, he raised a very interesting question that poverty should be one of our concerns, studying how to negotiate with the problems. Anyway, thank you very much. Now I request Professor Sunil that is the executive editor, Haryana Institute. In fact, Haryana was one of the first to start one of our own friends. Was a professor, then later he became a vice chancellor of Haryana University, Kurukshetra. So, sir, I request Sunil.
How much time I have, sir? 10 to 12 minutes.
So you are the last.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. And trying to express my profound thanks to Professor Sitaram Rao, Professor Pallavi, and the whole Department of Public Administration, the B.R. Ambedkar Open University, for affording me this opportunity to speak in front of
such a galaxy of scholars of public administration. We are discussing 75 years of public administration. Yesterday and today, we find here people who have been witness to this journey for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. They have seen the days of public administration when it was struggling to come out of political science and establish itself as an independent scientific stream of study, to being a multidisciplinary subject, and now the quest for being labeled and hailed as interdisciplinary. It's been an interesting journey. And the famous English poet, John Donne, has written in some different contexts addressing human beings. He says, no man is an island entire to itself. All are part of a continent. Same is true about any academic discipline in the present world, and there is a knowledge revolution. And leaving aside humanities, some literatures, all streams, all disciplines have done this quest to expand on the basis of the social changes, socio-economic aspirations, and the urge of researchers to foray into newer areas. In my small stature, I have been associated with this for the last 30 years. First at Indian Institute of Public Administration, then later at HIPA Institute of Public Administration, dealing with the journal. And I also had a very great fortune of working with a person like Professor S.P. Verma. In IAPA, normally we used to get about 350 to 400 papers in a year, sir. It was a large order. And every month, or maybe some 25 days, I mean, regular intervals, whatever was the bunch, sometimes it was 30, 40 papers. I used to discuss with our editor, Professor Verma. And every time the discussion was whether it fits into public administration or not. He used to tell me, Sunil, first thing you have to see before bringing all the papers to me, that how current are the references and bibliography. I said, okay, sir. He said, no, but this is not the only criterion. We have to see how this paper or this article contributes to the stream. Then one day I said, sir, a majority of our subscriptions is from the students or aspirants for public services. Okay, all the better. Let them learn all these things from an organ of public administration. What's the problem in that? I said, I don't have a problem. Because every day I was learning something from him. And you know, at times he was such a good teacher in personal capacity also. Once Professor Mohit Bhattacharya came, he brought him to my room. And for good 2 hours, we discussed about what to include in the journal, how to encourage people to write on applied areas in uncharted areas. And he said, Sunil, it's your job. People come to you, you tell them, discuss with them their paper. And with that kind of liberty, I exercised it to my fullest capacity. People sitting here, they know that almost every paper, whatever was accepted, I used to discuss with the contributor, my own notes, then the notes given by Professor Verma, and many times new things came. Only 2 years back, I asked Professor Parsarthi, so why don't you write something on the core public administration theory area? There are not many articles on that. And you know, he wrote a paper, sir. It is governance, governability, and governmentality. This title although it's a core area of public administration governance, but it includes so many things: sociology, human psychology, then a tendency to resist. So that has been the very interesting journey. In the later part of the journey at IPSR, Mr. Agarwal, UC Agarwal was our editor. At one time, he was Establishment Officer of Government of India, Personal Secretary. Then he was CVC. And the circle came back to this. Sunil, how does it fit to public administration? Then all what I learned from Professor S.V. Verma, I used to tell him, sir, this interdisciplinary subject. No, but give preference. I said we should equally distribute it. Then one day the paper came on ethics. I said, very good paper. I said, sir, but ethics, he's not discussing ethics in the context of public administration or public policy making. Then what to do? I said, sir, but we have been importing ideas, philosophies. So such challenges were there. That is why I say that is the experience of working in the journey from the discipline becoming multidisciplinary to interdisciplinary. I give you a small example, although it's not small. I'll seek your indulgence. It's a long list. The areas that cut across traditional social science disciplines, and we have been including in our journal. I made a list. Management studies, normal. Development studies, rural studies, urban studies, women's studies, national security, environmental studies, energy studies, food security, population studies, livelihood, peasant society studies, study of agrarian situations, fisheries, poverty and its elevation, water resource use and land water management, natural resource management, tribal development, participatory development, strategy to respond to globalization, organizational behavior, coping with climate change, infrastructure, coping with and responding to demographic changes, government and development, civil society and development, gender and development, use of social capital in development, user groups and development, measures for infrastructure development, social sector and its development, skill development for employment, livelihood, development planning, multi-level planning, development administration, steps to achieve SDGs, human development, very long list, I'll cut it short. Then country studies, regional studies, district studies, policy studies, interaction between social sciences and agricultural sciences. Very interesting. Financial management and development, ethics, integrity. A very long list. I don't think many disciplines, many subjects can boast of a list like this. Very recently, we have a group of public administration, which is run by Professor Malik. And our young friend, Dr. Sriram, put a question in the group that somebody who has done MA in economics wants to do PhD from the Department of Public Administration. What to do? I expected that there will be some response from people because almost all of them are concerned with public administration and academicians. Only one or two responses. Then my impression was that either it was a very self-answering question or nobody wanted to commit on that. Here is the challenge to this interdisciplinary approach. Sir, you might be knowing in Rajasthan University, there was Department of Economics and Public Administration initially. And later it became Department of Public Administration. So anybody need not seek answer to that. We have to look into the history, how the discipline has developed. What we have to focus is what needs to be taught and researched depending upon the socio-political, economic context of society at this particular juncture. The above examples point to the fact that more and more we look at the things from an interdisciplinary perspective, and that teaching and research should accordingly be based upon interdisciplinary fields rather than on the traditional disciplines. In a sense, the multidisciplinary nature is based on the discipline being considered together, whereas the interdisciplinary, it cuts across. It is established because there was a quest to develop. Sometimes in a difficult situations, we have some very interesting answers. My impression is that the discipline was struggling to gain an identity, and in that people, scholars, our teachers, they found that all these areas, they are concerned is public administration, state, its machinery, functions of the state, what defines governance, what improves governance. And that way, things keep on adding to it. I have a small example to share with you, sir. When at the time of COVID-19, there was a letter from Health Secretary to Government of India to all the state governments that you please document your experience in combating COVID. In Haryana, it came to HIPAA. I know 2 more states where it went to the state institutes, because you know that the public administration people will find an answer, can observe the situation closely. And at the initial stage, when restrictions were imposed, Section 144 was invoked in most of the states, considering it as law and order problem. Then my DG at that time, a very senior IS officer from Haryana, Mrs. Surina Rajan, we used to interact daily in connection with the documentation. I said, madam, this is not correct. So yes, I spoke to Chief Secretary today and I told him that 187 is to be invoked. Haryana was the first state to invoke Section 187, which pertains to emergencies, medical emergencies, and not a law and order problem. So I'm not saying that the law itself of the land is inadequate, but who will interpret it? The person who has experience from the ground. And sir, you told me about, tell us about this, what is being taught to the civil servants at Missouri. I have experience of working in 2 training institutions, IAP and HIPAA. And I find a disconnect, sir. I may be making a not very good statement. There is a different public administration which is being taught there at Missouri or at IAP or at HIPAA. And it's a different public administration what we're discussing here. Our main concern is the theory, the principles. And the theoretical base which has been developed over the years. We had a foundation course for state civil services at Haryana. And although I was not part of that, but the DG knew my nature, that he will poke his nose in everything. So she called me and said, madam, where is public administration in this? I said, no, but they are the new entrants. We have to tell them so many things. It's kind of orientation. I said, if they are not oriented into how the state machinery acts, what is good? That they will learn in the field. Then, madam, that is the problem. They learn wrong things in the field then. I have to give them, this is the correct path. This is how it is being addressed. This is a collective wisdom which has come over the years. And you have to follow that first. Village study, if an officer goes in the training to village study and he is not told about how Panchayat institutions they function, what are the rural realities, and sir, you very correctly said, in the last batch, 22, there were 6 officers in Haryana cadre who came for final training at HIPA. 4 of them were engineers, 5th one was a doctor, and only the 6th person, he was also a person of mathematics. So the challenge is to bring them into public administration. Because public administration will not be run by the books or the research papers. That disconnect has to go, which is when we discuss about the present status of the discipline, that is the main concern. And I'll sum it up, sir. Professor Donald Mengel, well-known scholar of public administration, again, I'll quote him in some different contexts, but what he wrote, it makes sense when we talk about multidisciplinary nature and what is the quest for being multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. He says, rules and regulations, even laws, are helpful, but doing the right thing often means doing more than just following the rules. The aim here is not to find one right solution, but to develop the competence to recognize challenging options. We have several options in front of us, and learning to systematically negotiate them based on public service values. It is these values which are touchstone of functioning of a government, quality of its functioning or lack of it. And this focus on interdisciplinary reasoning and contribution to peer disciplines through learning and experiences from ground during the process of decision making and implementation in the complex areas of functions. The academic community, I always say from such forums whenever I'm invited, that the onus is on the research guides. Onus is on the people, because they are a student when they come to do PhD, want to do some research. It's a human tendency to seek something easy, not very complicated, not to run around. From that stage, that new chart has to be given. And one final example again I'll give, how that happens. When I talk of faculty, sir, once Professor Partharthi went with me to T.N. Chaturvedi Sahab. He wanted to invite him for the international conference, and I accompanied him. I introduced him that he is Professor Partharthi from Osmania. He's been there for so many years and all these things. They talked for about 2-3 minutes. Then there was a long pause. And he said, well, Professor, what is the latest that you have read on public administration? Any other person would have fumbled for words. I don't know why he was ready for the answer. He gave the name of the book. And they discussed that book for good 5-6 minutes. That's a very, very big lesson. How to evaluate and how to suggest and how to improve oneself. This interdisciplinary stream, the status which is today, it has not just come out of necessity. The discipline has established itself by that quest. People, researchers, professors, guides, observers, they have contributed. And it's a collective wisdom that has brought the discipline to this stage. And the last vestige which is to be broken is the disconnect I'm speaking about. If we are able to overcome that disconnect, there will be nothing like that and the ideal situation to run a state. Thank you. Thank you.
very interesting, partly autobiographical and partly his own rooting in the discipline. Professor Verma and Professor Mohit Bhatt, they were also very good friends of mine. You know, Verma was a very lovable man also, apart from his interests. Mohit Bhattacharya, of course, his grounding is more in the political science and larger, if you see later writings of Mohit Bhattacharya, he was a good hairy mind, and also he was located in public administration. I think these are all that's why I said first generation of scholars were all drawn from the interdisciplinary background. Some of us were trained in public administration. Later we realized that discipline is very restricting, and so we widened our interests. So, and of course, you are heading an institution and you train the administrators, and you know what the nature of administrators, how they're changing. And in fact, we wrote an article in Indian Journal of Public Administration, Social Basis of Administrative Culture. And we said there are 5 types of administrators. One is the arrogant IAS officers. Secondly, very competent and very efficient IAS officer. Third is comprador IAS officer committed to global capital. And the fourth is lumpen, who are completely corrupt and degenerated. Fifth is very concerned and committed IAS officers who have concern for the poor people, marginalized section. These are the classes in the society. These are the 5 classes in the society. Which class or which culture they are responding depends on what culture they represent. It's arrogant, little Brahminical arrogance or upper caste arrogance, then you will find. But the lumpen in the contractor class, real estate class, they are located there. So there was one Ceylon, Sri Lanka, there was a group. So they were talking about our article. I said, I am the author of that. They said it's a compulsory reading in Sri Lanka Institute of Administration, that article. Anyways, I think very interesting experience. Now I request Professor Venkatesh. He teaches public policy. Otherwise, his basic specialization was on the social movements and backward class movements. But in National Institute of Rural Development, going along with the Minister of Rural Development to international delegation. So when he was selected in University of Hyderabad, he was in a dilemma. Whether to stay back in NIRD or come to University of Hyderabad. So some of us thought instead of in NIRD, always university system is better. But anyway, he also has a wider interest. I think he's one of the right scholars to speak on this discipline.
Yeah. In fact, it is my privilege being a brainchild of Professor Argopal, the session which is being chaired by Professor Argopal. I am thankful to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Sitaram Rao Garu, the former Registrar, Venkataya Garu, Dr. Pallavi, Srinivas Garu, and others. And in fact, it is a very big challenge before me to speak the very distinguished professors of public policy, scholars of public policy from different parts of the country, having come from the political science background. But of course, I had a rich experience of working with the practicing administrators. Whether it was in Society for Elimination of Rural Poverty, it has been working for the reduction of the rural poverty, or National Institute of Rural Development, that has been working for the capacity building for the practicing administrators, and of course taking the training of the few thousands of elected public representatives, almost all parts of the country. My interest in the area of the public policy, of course, Professor Argopal is the mentor, guide, and philosopher. But it has intensified my interest when I was working with V. Ramachandran, the acting chairman of the Second Administrative Reforms Commission. In 2008, the President of India, made a critical comment on the implementation of the Backward Regions Grant Fund, BRGF. In response to that comment, the Ministry of Panchayat Raj Government of India has appointed a committee called National Advisory Cum Review Committee on Backward Regions Grant Fund. So in that occasion, there are about 12 senior IAS officers, including B.N. Yugandhar. It's not needed. And then V. Ramachandran was the chairman of that committee. So at that time, two things I asked. One is that when you look at the reports of the first Administrative Reforms Commission, the prefix is administration. For the second Administrative Reforms Commission, there are three terms. Administration is there, governance is there, management is there. These are the three terms which have been used. Then Ramachandran has told me that because of the world has changed. Yes, what it was used 3 decades ago is a process, but governance itself has been structured in the new institutional context. That was the one. And the second one is that, in fact, it has almost taken me for convince Ramachandran and B.N. Yugandhar to add Panchayat Raj to National Institute of Rural Development. In that report itself, I used to write the report. The draft report was corrected by V. Ramachandran and B.N. Yugandhar. In fact, Dr. M.N. Rai was also one of the members in that committee. M.N. Rai was convincing right from the very beginning to add the Panchayat Raj to NIRDPR. But V. Ramachandran and B.N. Yugandhar, they used to test me. A series of questions they used to ask me. Then I built the argument that Balwantrai Mehta and Professor M. Sivaya have identified one of the important gap in the implementation of the rural development programs. The rural development, it is an end, but it requires an instrument, the Panchayat Raj institutions. So in that report I drafted, I convinced both V. Ramachandran and B.N. Yugandhar. Therefore, today, the Panchayat Raj has been added to National Institute of Rural Development, NIRDPR now. It was once upon a time NICD to NIRD to NIRDPR. So that has intensified my interest in the public policy and governance. So whenever I go for the interacting with the people, whether they are practicing administrators of the All India Service or elected public representatives or academicians, the first question I ask is that, what is the difference between government and governance? The fundamental question. Most of the people, of course, you can set aside the elected public representatives, academicians and bureaucrats, they say that government means governance and governance means government. Or at best, in the bureaucrats, in the process of interacting with the bureaucrats, they say that governance means it is the government, but they go ahead and add a term, value-added term called good governance. Government means good governance. So then I asked that means that you are agreeing that there is a bad government, therefore you are the good governance. That is there is no clarity. There is no clarity. This is being used as a synonym rather than it is indicating, standing for that something different. That way, if you read Mark Bever in his book, says Handbook of Governance, or David Levy for Oxford Handbook of Governance, or writings of Roads, and a series of the scholars, in fact, Guy Peters also, you can see the different context. So therefore, in this context, my focus is basically on the shift from the public policy governance as a standalone silo approach to multidisciplinary approach. So for this, I would like to emphasize on three important dimensions. One is how there has been a shift from a silo approach to multidisciplinary approach. That's the one. Second is what are the nuts and bolts which are required in order to strengthen this growing discipline. And third one is that the very specific comments to academic institutions, because there are good academic administrators of the higher education institutions are here, and probably soon some of them may also become either advisors or members in the Higher Education Council of India that is likely to be created, and there are good number of finest people are here. See, when you look at it retrospectively, right from the age of the Enlightenment in the 18th century, it was one of the great contributions of the age of the Enlightenment was that social experience is supposed to be converted into social knowledge, because the knowledge is not for just for the sake of the knowledge. Knowledge is for the sake of the knowledge was the argument of the state sciences, cameral science. But age of the enlightenment has shifted that argument into that social science knowledge is supposed to be used for the betterment of the society. Betterment of the society. So then, from the beginning of the 19th century itself, when we look at the various disciplines which have emerged because of rise of the new discipline, knowledge in the social sciences was the requirement in the context of the unification of the nations and the rise of the new context, therefore the cultural linguistic identity, and then social structuralization, and then the individual racial choice, and then behavioral statistics. In this context, what was known as one of the most important constraints or the limitation that was existing in the 19th century was the standalone approach, the silo approach. There was no convergence of the knowledge. But by late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, if you look at the series of the factors, whether it was the demand for the empirical social science knowledge, growing demand for the social policies, national level policies because of the communism and then the nationalism that was emerging, and then a shift from neoclassical to welfare economics, then rise of the survey research method, that is because the Chicago School of the Behavioral Sciences, and then organizational theory, the organizations which have flourished while owing to its origin, genesis to the Max Weber notion of the bureaucracy. All these factors have culminated in giving a new direction to the social sciences in the form of converting social sciences into policy sciences. That was in the post-Second World War, more specifically from 1950s onwards, that was coined by Harold D. Laswell. So Harold D. Laswell was influenced by John Dewey and then Chicago School of Behavioral Sciences. It was Harold D. Laswell. He has attributed three important characteristic features to policy sciences. Number one, it is supposed to be problem oriented. The policy science is supposed to be problem oriented. Second is that it is supposed to be a normative aspect. It is unlike the positivism. The the values are bound to exist. We are supposed to take into account. And third aspect is the interdisciplinary aspect. So this is what Harold D. Laswell has attributed. However, the policy cycle approach that was given by Harold D. Laswell over a period of time from 1950s to almost 1990s has dictated the entire world in terms of the policy science. But by 1990s, policy cycle approach was subjected to a series of criticism. People have started criticizing that is a top-down approach. It is a heuristic approach. It is a stages model. Public policy making process is not in such a mechanical process. Policies making is a contestation. Politics is basically an ideological contestation, and public policy is an instrument for the accommodation, resolving these conflicts, because the conflicts, cleavages, and contradictions are bound to exist in the society. So policy making is not such a easy task. So that was the criticism which has emerged on policy cycle approach. Therefore, there has been a shift from interdisciplinary approach to multidisciplinary approach. The multidisciplinary approach was contextualized in the rise of the neo-institutionalism. The neo-institutionalism is the basis for the rise of it is shift from interdisciplinary to multidisciplinary. That is the state, civil society, and the market. These are the three important players who have emerged as the parallel players. While challenging the Max Weber notion of the bureaucracy, the neoliberalism has emerged. They have started demanding for the space for the market. Market has been the rise of the conflict between the state and the market was conceptualized in the form of the new public management. The new public management theory has advocated for the reforms, governance reforms. And at the same time, the nexus between the state and the market was challenged by the civil society. From 1990s, when you see the series of the social movements which have emerged at the global level, even in India. No, Mazdoor Kisan Sex Sangat in 1990s. Harat ko kam dev, kam ka pura dam dev. Hamara paisa, hamara hissa. लागू करो रोजगार guarantee कानून को लागू करो. It was the kind of powerful slogans raised from the civil society by the Mazdoor Kisan Sangathan. That is the representative of the civil society movement that has questioned the kind of nexus that was existed between the state and the and then corporate sector, the market, because the level of the scam that was taking place, the amount of corruption, the delay and then secrecy, that was colonial legacy of the confidentiality that was existed in the administration. So therefore, the civil society has emerged. This was that is what V. Ramachandran was referring to, structuralization of the governance and using of these three terms in second administrative reforms in the context of the neo-institutionalism is the one important dimension. Second one is the rise of new theoretical frameworks. While questioning the policy cycle approach, you can see that advocacy coalition framework, Sabatier, Christopher Webel, I met last January in University of Colorado. Christopher Webel, there was an international conference. It says that advocacy coalition framework has been admitting that conflicts, cleavages, contradictions are bound to exist in the society. There are two coalitions, two advocacy coalitions. Policy making is a confrontation. One is representing for the development growth, another one is representing for the welfare. They have did thousands of studies, thousands of case studies, and this has been a dominant paradigm today in the world, replacing of the policy cycle approach. In fact, the policy cycle approach is a outdated one in the Western society. But whereas in Indian society, still we have been struggling with the policy cycle approach. Then policy network theory, another important one. Because of the rise of the new institutionalism, policy institutions are supposed to be networked. That is another one. Evidence-based public policy. Then social experimentation. Social experimentation has become another one. Now, if you refer, the best example is that the movement led by All India Association for the Protection of the Education, Anil Sadgopal, Professor Argopal, even in fact Professor Santa Sinha, they have experimented for the policy. The eradication of the child labor. And in this process, the Right to Education Act has become, because they have provided substantial evidences that civil society, these organizations can do the social experiments in order to influence the policy making. So that is another important theoretical framework. And then technological advancement, as someone has said, that information communication technology, artificial intelligence and machine learning. In fact, yesterday evening, the entire session was concentrating on this technological advancement and the governance process. There are a good number of case studies, but of course they require some theoretical conceptual framework to fine tune. And then in order to represent all the changing paradigms, then there is an association called International Public Policy Association that is being headed by Guy Peters, and now Ramesh from Singapore University is the president. These are the factors which shifted the policy from interdisciplinary to multidisciplinary, and new education policies also using the term multidisciplinary approach. And following the Kasturi Rangan report, today the higher education institutions have been restructuring and revamping the academic curriculum, the pedagogy, the courses, interdisciplinary. Now the courses are university level courses, school level courses, and then departmental level courses. University level courses, they are supposed to be multidisciplinary, something from science, the life sciences people, then science, something from the chemistry, something from the physics, mathematics, computer science. School level courses, economics, sociology, political science, public policy, and then within the disciplinary center. That is the kind of multidisciplinarity has been emerging. So in this changed context, at least the policy and governance are being perceived from 5 dimensions. One is that public policy analysis is for the democracy, democratization of the society. It is not only the democratization of the state. Through the public policy, the scholars, the thinkers, the policy analysts are supposed to set right the behavior of the state to be a more democratic. That is the one dimension that has been emerging. Then second dimension is that public policy analysis as a critique of the developmental models. No, we have the, in fact, Drajek and all these people have rejected the technocratic and accommodative policy analysis. And they have offered the alternative way of criticizing of the developmental state, the developmental models. In fact, Professor Argopal keep on referring to Gunnar Myrdal Asian drama during those frequently. But nowadays, still there are some of the critical theory has emerged, critical assessment has emerged, and interpretive theories have been emerged. Because of an Indian context, public policy is being understood as a policy cycle approach, program evaluation, and organizational theory. But that has been at one point of time, but that needs to be strengthened. And then third dimension is public policy governance as a critical listening, creating the space for the participation of the people, listening to the other side of the voice, the marginalized, excluded people, the deprived people voices need to be taken into account. So that is what deliberative democracy concept is being incorporated in the context of the policy analysis. Otherwise, you will become outdated, redundant if you can't upload because most of the theories of the public administration have already been hijacked by management theory people. And then public policy analysis as a puzzle solving and public policy analysis as a advice. So this is the changing paradigm in this context. We need to strengthen in terms of theoretical, methodological, and then providing of the substantial evidence base. So then only we will be able to create a lot of employment opportunities as well as the strengthening of the subject. Thank you for giving this valuable opportunity.
I think this was an extremely interesting presentation. And I know Venkatesh because he was my student. He was not only studying, but he is also was associated building a movement outside, backward class movement. So he brought his experience and his learning. And a teacher always feels so happy and satisfied that his own scholars keep abreast of knowledge and become very robust scholars. I'm happy, Venkatesh, with your presentation. Now, this last presentation, Professor Baljit Singh Manji, Indian Democracy and Administration. Again, another very interesting area. Sir, please take about 10 to 12 minutes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to the organizers, Professor Pallavi, Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University, and double thanks to Professor Partha, who was instrumental to bring me here. And it is always a treat to listen to Professor Hargopal. I have listened to him for the second time. First time I heard him at Punjab University, Chandigarh, in a seminar organized by Professor BRAOU. And he has given a very stimulating opening remarks. And that some way are related with my presentation. Delegates on the dais, off the dais. My presentation is organized into 4 parts. And the title of my presentation is Democracy, Indian Democracy and Indian Administration, an overview of a symbiotic relationship. Because the Indian democracy and Indian administration, they are closely interrelated with each other. The Indian democracy can't operate without Indian administration, and the Indian administration can't work without the Indian democracy. In a theoretical sense, both are empowering or enabling each other in their respective domain. In addition to it, if we look at democracy and the administration in a theoretical and conceptual framework, they are related with each other. And when you try to locate in the context, Indian context, if you go through the Indian Constitution, and before I talk about the constitutional framework, even if you look at the state is not only a political institution, state is also an administrative structure. So in the very institution of state, the administrative as well as the political aspects are integrated. And that integration has been translated in the Indian Constitution because Indian Constitution is the theory of Indian state. And Indian Constitution, if you read Indian Constitution, it has provided the detailed description of the political structures as well as the administrative structures. So therefore, bifurcating administration from politics or bifurcating Indian administration from the Indian politics will not enable us to reach at a proper understanding of both. Now, let's come to the core of my presentation, which I've divided to 4 parts. And these 4 parts are corresponding to the 4 specific contexts. One is the colonial context. Another is the post-colonial context, which was liberal, driven by the liberal philosophy. And the third is a neoliberal context, where both Indian democracy and Indian administration unfolded hand in hand. That is the third context. And fourth is the post-neoliberal context, which is a contemporary context. So let's begin with the first phase. I'll try to be very brief and quick. When we look at the colonial context, during the colonial context, why I'm referring to the colonial context? Because the foundations of Indian democracy and the foundations of Indian administrations were laid down during the colonial period. So hence the relationship between the two started evolving during the colonial period itself. The orientation of the colonial administration, the orientation of the administration, Indian administration during the colonial period was colonial to serve the colonial interest, and so was the orientation of the democracy, Indian democracy, which was not very representative in character, but having some element of election and some sort of representation to the people. So it was also, both were designed, both were operating to serve the common goal. The common goal was how to sustain and legitimize the colonial rule in India for a long time. This tendency could not survive for long because of the civil society movement, which was already in a very, you can say it was in a very aggressive mode, and which ultimately resulted into Indian independence. And with that, a new context emerged, both for Indian democracy and the Indian administration. Now, if you look at the post-colonial context, the Indian democracy as a colonial construct, as a colonial legacy, continued to operate in the post-colonial period. However, its orientation was changed, keeping with the requirement of the post-colonial Indian society. And similarly, the effort was also made to change the orientation of the Indian administration, because now the context was, post-colonial context was for both Indian democracy and Indian administration. The context was new and the objective was to serve the society at large, to serve the public and public interest. And as Professor Hargopal said in his opening remarks, to transform both the Indian administration and the Indian democracy. Their objective was common. Common objective was to transform the Indian society to establish Indian society, transform Indian society from a hierarchical society to egalitarian society, and to ensure socio-economic and political justice. And the democracy, in the post-colonial period, the Indian democracy required the representative character in the true sense of the term, and having public agenda in mind. Similarly, the orientation of administration was changed by trying to, through the training, by providing training to the administrators, and the effort was made to develop the development administration, because it was understood that administration in colonial format will not be able to ensure, will not be able to achieve the objective of the post-colonial era, which will not be able to ensure the socio-economic justice. It will not, in a nutshell, the administration will not be able to act as an instrument of socio-economic change. So the idea of development administration was conceived, and effort was made to evolve or to translate development administration at ground. And as a result of this, a positive kind of relationship emerged. A symbiotic relation of positive nature developed between Indian democracy and the Indian administration, which resulted in several policies, public policies, which have made long-lasting impact on the social, economic, and political life of the people of India and Indian society at large. For example, the establishment of the education institutions, the institutions, health facilities, infrastructure development, industrialization, agriculture, modernization of agriculture, which have contributed in a tremendous way for the growth of economic growth, as well as through the affirmative policies. The effort was made to ensure the justice, socio-economic justice to the underprivileged section of the societies. However, this relationship could not last for long. It was there till the Prime Minister Nehru was in power. But in the post-Nehru era, the liberal democracy of India started derailing. The negative tendencies have emerged in the Indian democracy, from institutionalization of power to personalization of power, which was quite evident under the leadership of Indira Gandhi, and to some extent under the leadership of Rajiv Gandhi. And as you know, that parliamentary democracy in India was operated by the political parties. And if you look at the political party which operated parliamentary democracy at national level, and for some time at the provincial level or at the state level, was Indian National Congress, one-party dominant system. And due to this one-party dominant system, the democratic culture could not evolve within the party. And as you know, that party formed the government. The same hierarchical culture, the pattern-client, which was characterized by the pattern-client relationship within the party, that same culture was transferred to the functioning of Indian democracy, because the same party formed the government. And that resulted into the emergence of iron law of oligarchy within the political party, and also within the government. The leader emerged more powerful than the institutions. So instead of institutionalization of power, the personalization of power happened in the Indian democracy, which was certainly a negative tendency. And the impact of this institutional personalization of power was that the horizontal division of power, which has been prided in the Indian Constitution by way of separation of power, and the vertical division of power, which has been prided in the way of distribution of power between the Union of India and state, got disturbed many a time, because as you know, from 1967 onward, the regional parties came into power. The party in power at national level used the office of the governor to destabilize the governments of the opposition, not destabilize, many governments were dismissed. So that undermined the very concept, framework, ethos, and the spirit of democracy, which has been prescribed and described in the Indian Constitution. Because democracy has to operate at the macro level as well as at the micro level. Then, if you look at the other side, administration, what happened in the administration? The development administration, which started taking shape for some time, for some initial years, particularly during the Nehru era, in the subsequent period, the development administration suffered from the tendency of bureaucratization. The tendency of bureaucratization in the Indian administration worked as an impediment to the process of development, to the process of economic development, to the process of the overall development of the society, for the process of governance as well. And due to that, the license permit quota Raj system was an instrument which further institutionalized, which further helped the process of bureaucratization to consolidate. Now, same tendency emerged in the party which was in power, which was operating the parliamentary democracy in India. It has also become a bureaucratic organization, a oligarchic organization, and similar kind of tendencies emerged in the administration or Indian administration. And eventually what happened, that there was a situation when the Indian economy landed in a crisis, balance of payment crisis in the late 80s, and the democracy was also facing problem because of the iron law of oligarchy. And if you look at the emerging tendencies in the parliamentary democracy in India, in the later part of the liberal era, the parliamentary form of government in India became a prime ministerial form of government because the locus and focus of power shifted from legislature to the council of ministers, then from council of ministers to cabinet, and from the cabinet to the prime minister. Yeah. The prime minister became the center of attraction. All powers are concentrated in the hands of the prime minister, and the new structure, PMO, later on the new structure, PMO emerged. There is no provision of PMO in the constitutional framework of India. There is no provision of cabinet in the constitutional framework of Indian democracy. Now, my point is that in the later part of the liberal era, the negative relationship emerged, negative symbiotic relationship emerged between the Indian democracy and the Indian administration. Both was reinforcing each other. And that set the that created a critical mass, which led to the emergence of the third context, to which we call a context characterized by the neoliberal philosophy all over the world, including India. And in this neoliberal era, the neoliberal policy set the neoliberal era in motion. And neoliberal policies were introduced, keeping with the failure of the development administration. And it was considered that it was not the state at fault. It was the wrong operationalization of state as a political entity and the faulty operationalization of state as the administrative structure. They were responsible for the failure, and that failure created a critical mass wherein the things started moving in another direction. That we need to, when we look at the parliamentary democracy, the one-party dominant system came to an end and multi-centrism emerged in the Indian democracy. It was a positive tendency if you look at that development from the perspective of democratization. But if you look at the administrative structures, the full stop was put on the license permit quota Raj system by introducing the policies of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. In this new context, the right sizing and downsizing the size of the state and the government. State was considered as a bad actor, bad economic manager, as a corrupt institution, as an inefficient institution, and the focus was shifted from state to market, particularly in the economic domain, and not only in the economic domain. A new term was coined in the domain of public ad, governance. As Professor Hargopal said, the focus shifted from structure to governance. Now the structure was defective. Instead of correcting and modifying that structure, the structure was left as such and focus was on the process, and the policy implementation to considerable extent started shifting to the private sector. Public-private partnership emerged. And it was argued the state, which is supposed to frame the policies. Of course, the policy, framing the public policy continued to be the domain of the state. And of course, when the policies are framed, it is not only that state as a political structure operates, state also operates as an administrative structure. The public policies are the byproduct of the political regime as well as the administration, because the administration feeds, Indian administration feeds the political elite and how the policies are framed. Policy formulation continued to be a top-down process and elitist in character. However, it was there in the past also. It became more technocratic and managerial kind of exercise during the neoliberal era, because in the neoliberal era, the public administration, the Indian administration as a practice, Indian administration in practice started borrowing the managerial techniques from the management, new public management. You all are aware of this fact as teachers of public ad. And the new public management was invented, wherein the more focus was on the productivity, efficiency, curtailing the expenditure of the government, and then fueling the economic growth and productivity at the cost of the public good. Because state is supposed to serve the public good, administration is also supposed to serve the public good. But both Indian democracy also started moving in the wrong direction, and the administration also started following that, because again, they operated in a symbiotic kind of arrangement. Now, the public policies, if you look at the third phase, at a substantive level, the agenda of public policy has been set by the corporate houses. They are driven by the corporate agenda. Of course, in order to address the masses, because state is a public institution, in order to be politically correct, some populist measures, some populist policies, some token benefits were passed to the people to make sure that ultimately the government will be driving political mandate from the masses. So the paradox in this new era, the paradox emerged between the political imperatives of democracy and the economic imperatives of the economy. Democracy is not only a political construct. Democracy is a multi-dimensional canvas. Democracy is an economic phenomena. Democracy is a social phenomena. Democracy is a political phenomena. If you read the Indian Constitution, it is very well spelled out in the fundamental rights and directive principles. And the founding fathers of Indian Constitution, they conceived democracy as a wider concept, as a way of life, as an institution, political institution, as an economic process, as a social process. Now, the democracy requires, the imperative of democracy is inclusion. Inclusion of all the sections of society in the process of governance, in the process of representation, and providing distributive justice to the people, ensuring equity. Now the economy which emerged because of the neoliberal policy in the neoliberal era, it was driven by the logic of the market. And logic of the market is the survival of the fittest. Now the neoliberal democracy and the market economy in the neoliberal era started unfolding. And consequent upon that, the public interest became relegated to the background. The investment in health, education, social security became the major casualty, and states started running away from its responsibility. And states started saying that education, higher education is not the responsibility of the state. You are aware of the state of higher education in the India. Even in the health, if you look at the expenditure, allocation of expenditure, budgetary allocation have been very, very meager, whereas the liabilities of Indian state on the account of human development compounded, but the budgetary allocation was curtailed. Now, in this neoliberal era, has been in operation since last 3 decades. And now these neoliberal policies have also exhausted. As they have failed to deliver, the promise was they will eradicate the poverty, they will take care of the unemployment, they will ensure the vibrant growth. But on the ground, the reverse has been happening. Although the few people have benefited, I'm not denying the people who are technocrats, people who are educated, a very small section of the society has benefited. But what about the larger section of the society? Because state or Indian democracy is meant for each and every citizen. So is the case of the Indian administration. So now both have been facing, again, a very defining moment. Now democracy, the further deterioration in the democracy in the post-coalition era. Post-coalition era means from 2014 onward. My friend, I hope you all are familiar that as and when the Indian politics has witnessed the one-party dominant system, whether at the state level or whether at the national level, the democracy has been reduced to the rule of majority. Democracy has not bothered about the democratic politics. Now, the policies are framed, but there is no debate, there is no discussion in the legislative bodies. The policies are framed in the executive board. So the dilemma of Indian democracy has been that it started with a legislative model of governance where the power is broad-based, but in practice, it has moved to a executive model of governance where the prime ministerial form of setup is shaping each and everything. And the executive has always tried to tame the legislature and the judiciary. In the parliamentary democracy, the situation could have been other way around. It is the legislature which is supreme vis-a-vis the executive. But in practice, the reverse has happened. As far as administration is concerned, the new public management, the management technique, administration, public Indian administration was reduced to the management. Management is not administration. Management works for profit. Management is driven by the market. The very term public, the Indian administration started losing its credential, public credential. Indian administration is not a private limited, and so is not the Indian state. That has serious repercussion in the long run because that undermines the very basis of political obligations. If the state is not a private limited, if state won't serve the people, if state won't transform the society, the people will question the existence of state or political regime. What happened in Sri Lanka and your neighboring country in 2022? The political regime controlled power from all angles. But when the people were on the ground, because state failed to deliver to the people, state failed to perform its duty of statecraft, because democracy and administration are helping the state to perform its duty of statecraft in an efficient and in effective manner. But in practice, the situation is very, very different because there is always gap in the theory and practice. But that gap should be reasonable and tolerable. If the gap is beyond reasonable and tolerance, that will lead to a crisis. And crisis is also not a negative phenomenon because if you read the history of the world, the development is always driven by the crisis. Now, in the post-neoliberal era, the new theories of public administration, the new public service, the new Weberian state, public value theory, and the whole of the government approach, they all have brought state in. That the state is very, very important. Public administration, the state without public administration can't work. State without administration can't work. Private sector can't replace the public sector. The need is to develop a synergy. Private sector is also required. Public sector is also required. But there's a need to integrate the economy, market economy, state, and the civil society. And in order to correct the negative tendencies, the civil society has played a very important role to bring correction, course correction in the functioning of democracy or in the state. You have already witnessed in India, many civil society movements are in operation. Recently, the farmers' movement to correct the course of the government because policies have to be framed by taking stakeholder on the board. Policies cannot be framed by ignoring the stakeholders. Similarly, the administration, because now another challenge, not challenge, I think opportunity which the democracy as well as, just sir, one minute, administration has been facing. It is a challenge as well as opportunity. That the information technology has provided an opportunity. The crisis to which the democracy has reached and the Indian administration has reached, it is a new opportunity to redefine, to rejuvenate, keep in view the prevailing ground realities and also by foreseeing the future, nearby future, to make it more socially relevant unless democracy and Indian administrations are socially relevant, they won't be able to survive merely by using the coercion and coercive aspect of state structure, because that has also having limitation. The imperative of democratic administration should not be subordinated to the uncertain managerial approaches, because the state and administration are ultimately accountable for the welfare of the people, for the rights of the people, for the transparency, for impartiality, for fairness, for accountability. They are not only responsible for productivity, efficiency, and the increasing the economic growth. With these concluding remarks, I'm thankful to the chair for tolerating me for time, and thanks to the audience for listening with curiosity.
Friends, I'm very sorry to stop Professor Mann because I share similar concerns. I have to, in fact, go to a meeting where what is the role of civil society in checking the authoritarian state, and say part of the civil society effort. See, organizers should never choose a civil liberties man to chair a session. Having fought for right to freedom of speech all through life, I never feel like constraining or asking the scholar to stop. But I must compliment the organizer for one thing. All 5 scholars are grounded in interdisciplinary approach. Their understanding and their scholarship is not confined to discipline of public administration, but all of them have an understanding of interdisciplinary approach. Professor Mann, what you said, that in ongoing election, in fact, the most debated item is the Indian Constitution, whether Constitution will survive or not. So the opposition parties, even the ruling party, even Prime Minister is compelled to say that no, the Constitution will not be. That's although they have prepared an alternative Constitution and that Constitution is ready. They have done it about a year back in Allahabad. And in fact, they would have in fact said, but the general democratic, whatever democratic climate emerged, now the Prime Minister himself said, no, we'll not touch the Indian Constitution. We really don't know. I must end up with a note. When I was teaching political economy in Bangalore National Law School, my last lecture used to be what I've said. I used to give a question whether India will become fully fascist. It will stop with a semi-fascist. Like Germany, Italy, they are of a different kind. Given the multi-class structure and diversity and heterogeneity of Indian society, no political party can completely become fascist. It may stop, and then, as you very rightly said, if civil society becomes active, and all of us have a democratic concern, we would like to live in a democratic society, then we have to have this concern, and what Professor Mann said. So I stop here. I thank organizers, but I also say that this session is delayed by almost 45 minutes. So we have encroached into the other session, but anyway, this delay or whatever, I told both Venkataya and Professor Pallavi when they came that we are doing a policing job, but I'm happy with all the 5 presentations, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And as you said, it's truly like worthy, sir. Like though we have encroached, but we are running out of time, sir. Thank you so much. And as a mark of our respect and gratitude, we would like to felicitate the chair and the panelists, sir. Kindly accept our felicitations, sir. I request Professor Venkatesh, sir. I request Professor Vainandan, sir. Kindly come to the desk. We'll felicitate the panelists.
He is next. Chair.
Others are these, sir, also to kindly join us. Please do come.
You are chairing next session? Okay.
Sir, please felicitate
Since he was a vice chancellor, he will be able to control.
It's all your motivation and all.
So please do join us for this. Now I would like to invite Pallavi ma'am. So please do felicitate. And sir have given presentation on an interdisciplinary perspective on the state of contemporary.
No, we were all absolutely. Very good.
Right. Yeah, please.
I'll talk to you.
Father sir, please do felicitate Sunil.
Baljit Man, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Now I would like to invite Vainandan sir, C. Venkatesh sir to felicitate Sunil.
There was times to.
We'd like to invite Pallavi ma'am, Padasari sir, and Venkatesh sir to felicitate E. Venkatesh.
Next.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to invite C. Venkataya sir to give vote of thanks.
I thank Professor Aragopal sir for acting as the chairperson of the session, very important session on the interdisciplinary approach to the public administration. And all the speakers, we have thrown light on various aspects of the interdisciplinary approach of the subject, right from the dichotomy to the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. And without taking much time, I in fact failed to convince my chairperson to control the speakers. The reason why the time has been extended to, so I'm very much sorry for that. So the session will start very at once.
So we'll break for tea just for 5 minutes, sir. I hope you all understand and cooperate.